You know what was also buried in the New York Times article this weekend? That Nike is funding research.
Yes, you heard that right, Nike.
On children, according to the New York Times.
Basically experiments on little boys to understand how much they can be impaired so that they would be able to compete with little girls.
Nike is funding research on children that are receiving puberty blockers and gender change surgery.
What is going on?
I could not believe that this would be possible for an American sports apparel brand.
Why is a shoe brand involved in this at all?
We want answers.
It's so wrong on so many levels. Like from a women's and girls' perspective, we are not impaired boys.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today we are diving into a topic that has a lot of people fired up, myself included. Nike has allegedly been funding a study on transgender youth and puberty blockers to determine if stopping boys from going through puberty eliminates their physical advantage over biological females. Basically, they are funding mad science. A major sports brand is actively participating in completely eliminating fairness in women's sports. So we're going to unpack this controversy, the details, and what the public response has been. But before we get into it, please hit the thumbs up button on this video, and I would love it if you would subscribe as well. So what is this all about, and what has Nike been up to? Well, according to reports, Nike has been funding a study led by Dr. Catherine Ackerman that looks at transgender youth as young as 12 specifically, and how puberty blockers and hormone treatments affect their athletic performance. The goal? To see if suppressing puberty in boys who identify as girls can make it fair for them to compete in female sports. I mean, up until 5 minutes ago, when unhinged activists started to fuel mental illness in kids and youth and then back the insanity up by pretending that reality isn't a thing and the only thing that matters are your feelings, and after total delusion replaced science, we started having to have constant debates about what men and women are and the biological differences and what transition actually means. And largely, this debate has depended on one major key point, that after boys go through puberty, their physical advantages like greater muscle mass, bone density, and strength make competition against girls inherently, significantly, and undeniably unfair. And unsafe. I mean, as we know, the fact that they're boys means they shouldn't be competing in girls' sports at all. But apparently now we need studies to prove that these points of physical development between sexes are actually incredibly important, which is something that the vast majority of the country already knew just based on common sense and didn't need studies to prove. But for those demanding that they need these studies to make sure that this is a correct take on this issue, there are studies to show it. Like this one from the British Journal of Sports Medicine in 2021, which shows that even after a year of hormone therapy, men still retain significant strength advantages over biological females. No kidding. Now, there are some who advocate for this nonsense and get behind it all the time, no matter what. Will occasionally admit that the puberty thing is a problem because there are undeniable advantages that men have over women that no dress or amount of drugs will take away. Even Gavin Newsom admitted the unfairness recently. However, most will not even acknowledge that much. A dress and a name change is all that is needed to make this a fair competition, and anyone saying otherwise, especially the young women who lose out on athletic awards and scholarships as a result of this madness, means that you need to be threatened by the mob into silence. But women's rights, am I right? And you would think that knowing that going through puberty significantly widens the advantage that boys already have would send a signal to these people to say, you know, we just need to bring back common sense. This has gone too far. We need to bring back fairness. And it's time to acknowledge the fact that this has gotten ridiculous, that girls are losing out, and that there is a huge risk that girls are put in by allowing these boys to just call themselves girls and put themselves on the same volleyball court or field hockey team with them. no, to these diversity and inclusion fanatics, the answer is not to reverse course and maybe gain a little bit of sense and science back, but now to figure out how we can permanently stunt the growth of more boys earlier, to stop more boys from going through puberty. So that's where this Nike-funded study comes in, and it is raising some serious red flags. But just for kicks and giggles, let's talk about biology for a second. The argument for puberty blockers assumes that puberty is the only thing giving boys an edge in sports, and that is just not true. Male and female bodies differ from the moment of conception, and those differences start way before puberty kicks in. Many doctors have spoken out on this, and they point out that males have a higher testosterone level in utero before they're ever born. This affects skeletal development, body type, and even muscle fiber composition. Boys tend to have broader shoulders, narrower hips, and denser bones, which give them a mechanical advantage in sports like running, throwing, and tackling. These aren't things that you can erase with hormone therapy, and no matter how early you start. A 2024 study by sports scientist Gregory Brown found that even before puberty, boys outperform girls in events like running and jumping, suggesting inherent physiological differences. So the idea that puberty blockers can level the playing field ignores the fact that boys and girls are built differently from the ground up. Instead of celebrating those differences, this study seems to be pushing to chemically alter kids' bodies to fit an ideological agenda. Now, let's get to the heart of why this is so troubling, at least one of the many reasons, because the list is long. Nike is a brand that has built an empire on empowering athletes, especially women. They have sponsored countless female athletes and led the way in making sure that women are seen as equal in all things sports, from small community campaigns to national events and even to Olympic athletes. This is Alyssa Thompson, who was one of the first high school athletes signed to a Nike NIL deal in May of 2022, and her sister Gazelle was also signed to a Nike sponsorship contract for her incredible achievements in the same sport. Most of us already know who Caitlin Clark is, as she's become one of the most prominent names in women's basketball, and she signed a major deal with Nike as well. This is Allison Felix, the most decorated track and field athlete, having competed in multiple Olympic events and has won 11 medals. This is Alicia Montano, who raced while 8 months pregnant. Now, she did criticize Nike for reducing her sponsorship funding during this pregnancy, and she later moved to ASICS, but based on advocacy from both her and Allison Felix, it is my understanding that Nike did expand their protections for pregnant athletes. Again, it seems to have been their goal for a long time to encourage true equality in sports, which is based on making sure that women have the same opportunities as men to achieve gold medals and scholarships in athletics. But obviously, there can only be equality if women have their own spaces. And of all businesses, a global sports organization and company should know that. But no, they're now allegedly pushing studies on 12-year-old children that will more than likely cause irreversible damage and likely make it so that they will be permanently crippled in their mental and physical development. And so they won't even have success in the very thing that these studies are supposedly trying to prove is possible. Despite what these unhinged activists repeat, these drugs are not harmless. The UK's CAST review in 2024 found that puberty blockers can cause irreversible harm like reduced bone density and potential fertility issues. The studies that pushed for the use of puberty blockers have been repeatedly shown to be extremely limited, both in participants and in the length of the study. Both studies following these patients end within a couple of years, and we don't hear how they're doing after about 5 to 10. A lot of this is because, again, this ideology has only become really rampant to this scale within the last decade or so it's virtually impossible for long-term outcomes to be known to the fullest extent at this point. And it's also widely known that a lot of these patients who get these drugs and hormones from one doctor do not end up revisiting that same doctor when they change their mind, because they realize that they were lied to and they cannot trust that doctor to lead them down the right medical path after they were led down the wrong one in a way that can only be classified as malpractice justified by political ideology. Dr. Nicole Sapphire, another expert, has called out the ethical concerns of the relentless influence of trans ideology because it's everywhere, from the classroom to the doctor's office to kids' favorite TV shows and social media influencers, leading to the very important questions that trans activists intentionally avoid answering, which is who's really making these decisions for kids? Themselves or parents, doctors, Hollywood, and corporate agendas. This isn't just about sports. It's about risking children's health for politics and the lie of inclusivity. And it's a total betrayal of the Nike brand and all of the women that they used to fight for. They've championed women's sports with campaigns for stars like Serena Williams, yet here they are potentially undermining the very fairness they have claimed to support. Jennifer Say, founder of XXXY Athletics, put it perfectly. She says, girls/women are not hampered or impaired males. It's never okay. The mere debate about how much impairing is the right amount is demeaning and degrading to women. And to be clear, Nike has been relatively silent on this, refusing to confirm or deny their role, which only makes it worse. This article from Outkick says, according to the Nike executive, the study was never initialized and it's not moving forward. But what exactly does that mean? Unfortunately, Nike has not provided any clarity. Outkick has also asked the Nike executive if Dr. Ackerman and Harper were wrong to say that Nike funded the study, something both have said multiple times since 2023 and as recently as 2025. The executive said no one was wrong, but that there might have been some gaps in the information chain. Again, what does that mean? To me, if you were being accused of something this egregious that you know is going to piss off your audience, you would distance yourself from it as quickly as possible and set the record straight. Saying, well, no one was wrong in saying that we were funding this study is a far cry from denying it. It's almost like saying, yeah, that's exactly what we were doing. But so far, again, all of this is alleged. They're just not saying it's not true. As far as what this might do for their brand, well, let's just say if Bud Light took a hit for their Dylan Mulvaney campaign, Nike could be in for a similar reckoning. That is, if people don't get bored of hearing about this issue and become desensitized to it, which means they won't demand answers or expect this brand or any brand to do better. And perhaps that's why they're not afraid to be associated with it, because they can see how much lower the reaction to the idea of sterilizing children has gotten, which is really, really sad and scary. This issue has not gone away, and it is just as important as ever. And it deserves as much outrage today as Bud Light received a couple of years ago. And we need to listen to those who are still trying to draw attention to this matter. Riley Gaines, a fierce advocate for women's sports, as we know, slammed Nike for conducting this experiment.
But this experiment is like Nike's own Tuskegee experiment. I guess you can't know the effects of intentionally harming children without intentionally harming children. And from a shoe brand. Like, did Bud Light teach them nothing? So this is from a piece the New York Times did just this past week. You can pause to read it all. Basically, it's saying this scientist who identifies as trans himself, Joanna Harper, is leading a study, an ambitious study of trans adolescents that measures before they begin hormone therapy and after they have begun to medically transition every 6 months, 4 or 5 years. You see it and highlighted right here. This study is being funded by Nike. And Nike has yet to answer to this. They have spent days now avoiding all reporters and journalists, asking them if this is true and why they're engaging in this. It'd be a shame if we tag them in the comments and let them know that we're watching and that we want answers. So if this wasn't enough to put you off from buying Nike ever again, maybe the fact that they're investing money into seeing if you can medically abuse boys enough to make it fair for them to compete against girls is.
And the backlash is not just online. Pro-woman advocates, which ironically include like 0 liberal women, are calling for boycotts, and with good reason. If Nike is willing to fund studies that prioritize ideology over science and children's well-being, why should we trust them with our dollars? This is not about inclusion. It's about fairness, safety, and protecting kids from irreversible choices that they cannot fully understand, as they're being influenced to do these things because the people that they do trust are telling them it's okay, because those people's brains have been broken to normalize something evil, and they are now willing to sacrifice their own kids to meet this completely warped definition of tolerance and empathy. So where do we go from here? Well, Nike needs to come clean. They need to either confirm that they're not funding this study or own up and explain why they're pushing this agenda. And ultimately, as consumers, we know that we hold the real power. We can demand better from these brands that claim to stand for fairness, or refuse to help them keep their lights on if they choose to go down this path. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I would love it if you would share this video. And also, I would love it if you would subscribe and help me to grow this channel. Other than that, keep it real, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.